Eventually they encountered the enemy north of Java, and it was an absolute catastrophe. There were American destroyers there, ancient beat-up old First World War vintage destroyers. They fired their torpedoes, ran out of fuel and left. A Dutch, they had no choice, there wasn't cowardice. A Dutch destroyer was sunk, British destroyer was sunk, and then it just got worse from there on. The 2 Dutch cruisers were sunk. The Dutch admiral shot himself in his cabin. The British cruiser, HMS Exeter, big powerful ship, she'd fought at the Battle of the River Plate, you'd know of. She was hit by a torpedo and had to limp back to Surabaya. In the end, after this catastrophic night battle, there were just 2 ships left, Perth and the American USS Houston. Heck Waller was a senior officer, so he took Houston under his command, and they went west, back to Batavia. And the port of Tanjung Priok, which had been bombed, it was burning, the oil tanks, there was this filthy black smoke burning there, to go and try and get some orders to find out what the hell else they should do. They were told to try and pass that night through the Sunda Strait, fairly narrow stretch of water which separates Java and the larger island of Sumatra. And so on the night of Saturday, the 28th of February, these 2 ships, battle-worn, their crews exhausted, low on fuel and ammunition, they attempted to break out from Java and back to Australia. They never made it. At the mouth of the Sunda Strait, at around just before midnight beneath a full moon, they ran into the main Japanese invasion force, surrounded by an overwhelming number of cruisers and destroyers. Perth and Houston fought quite literally until the last shell. They were firing practice ammunition, blanks, even star shell, which are utterly useless against an enemy, but anything to keep some of the guns going. The first shell hit them at exactly 11:26 p.m, boring into the forward funnel and rupturing a steam pipe, which added its banshee shriek to the din. Another struck a few minutes later near the flag deck, and the men there were the first to die. Among the bloodied and broken corpses was Perth's youngest officer, just a kid, a 19-year-old farmer's son from Winton in Queensland, Paymaster Midshipman Frank Tranby White. He had joined the ship just 2 days before Christmas. On the bridge, Lieutenant Hancox, the gunnery officer, worried that their ammunition was running low. At around midnight, Hancox told Captain Waller there was hardly any 6-inch ammunition left. The captain decided there was only one course of action. He decided to make a break for it, to somehow force a passage through the enemy into the strait, and he knew that Houston would follow him. So he gave the orders, and the ship came round. The first torpedo hit as they were settling onto the new course. It penetrated the starboard side through between the forward engine room and A boiler room, killing everyone there. Another one hit them further forward, just below A turret, and again the cruiser staggered like a wounded animal, although she was still moving through the water. That was it, and Captain Waller, recognising that all was lost, now gave the order to abandon ship. Some men went obediently to their abandoned ship stations, only to find the Kali floats there, the rafts smashed or gone. Some milled around in the waist, trying to decide when and how to jump for it. Get it wrong and you could be dragged down in the suction of the ship as she went under, or chewed up in her propellers. Most of the bridge personnel left when they heard the order to go, clattering down the ladders, port and starboard, every man for himself. And towards the end, there were only 3 figures left on the bridge: Captain Waller, Hancox, the gunnery officer, and Lieutenant Willie Gay, who was the officer of the watch. Hancox was bleeding from a shrapnel wound near his ear. He said to Gay, "Let's get off before she turns over." "What about Heck?" "He says he won't come," Hancox replied. Waller turned to look at them. "Get off the bridge, Gay," he said, and that was all. Peter Hancox went down the port-hand ladder and was killed when a shell or a bullet or another piece of shrapnel smashed into it. Willie Gay, the officer of the watch, went down the starboard side unscathed. He was the last man to see Hector MacDonald Laws Waller alive. Most of the men who abandoned the ship were in the water when a third torpedo struck well aft and again to starboard. and those who were nearby had the life crushed out of them by the explosive power of 500 kilograms of TNT. And a fourth and final torpedo hit about 12:15, this time on the port side, and that was it. Some men died mercifully quickly, others in slow agony. Some died deep down in the groaning, sinking hull, blown to pieces by the torpedoes, or drowning in the prolonged horror of men trapped alive by a crushed bulkhead or a jammed hatch. Others were shot to ribbons by the Japanese gunfire, which swept the starboard side of the ship, and even as they tried to leave her. Houston was still fighting. In the distance, the Perth men in the water could see flashes of gunfire and the stabbing white cones of the searchlights and the occasional flurry of coloured tracer bullets. And slowly Perth left them all behind. The fourth torpedo on the port side steadied to starboard list a little, but she was heavily down by the bow. Her stern was out of the water where one of the four propellers was still turning, and the last they saw of her was the battle ensign flying at a mainmast, lit by the Japanese searchlights, a little splash of red and white and blue in the night. There were 681 men on board that night. 353 of the ship's company, including Captain Waller, did not survive. Some were killed that night. Others were drowned in the Sunda Straits. A further 106 seamen died as prisoners of the Japanese. Many of them on the Burma-Siam Railway, although a couple of them were killed on that infamous Sandakan death march in Borneo. Their stories are both noble and tragic. Young men in the prime of their lives, cut down by Japanese brutality, wasted by slave labour, decimated by injury and disease. Just 218 men survived the war to make it back. The stories of their lives on the railway are absolutely harrowing, of brutality, of death and disease, but they're also a story of an Australian triumph over and above the odds. They did some amazing things. On Melbourne Cup Day, 1943, they actually staged a Melbourne Cup carnival in front of the Japanese. There's a remarkable account of that in the book. Some of them were eventually packed off to Japan to work as slave labourers in factories and coal mines there. Others ended up in different prison camps. Some of them saw the mushroom cloud from the atom bomb at Nagasaki. Big bomb that, they thought to themselves. They had no idea what it was. Some of them made it back. They all have breathtaking stories to tell, and to listen to them was one of the most remarkable events of my life. They don't brag about it, they don't boast, they are the most modest and unassuming of men. Even today there are some memories that cause them immense pain. To have met such men as these and the band of brothers who were Perth Ship's Company has been a privilege and an honour. There are around, I think, about 25 of them left now, men in their late 80s or early 90s. Some were too frail to talk. Others were as active as men 20 years younger, with a phenomenal memory for fact and detail. And to a man they gave generous, unstinting cooperation. They wrote for posterity in those diaries, and the survivors wanted their story to be told so that succeeding generations of Australians would know how it was. To listen to them, to read their memories and diaries was humbling and inspiring. They did not seek conquest or the spoils of victory as their enemies had done. They didn't go to fight in the service of some totalitarian tyranny. They went simply because they thought their country was worth defending. They did it to the best of their ability, hoping only to get the job done and to return to their families when it was all over. They were magnificent men. Every Australian sailor who goes to sea today, be it the most senior admiral or you young fellas here tonight, you sail in the wake of great men. We are all familiar, I guess, with that famous Ode to the Fallen, written in 1914 by the British poet Lawrence Binn. You know those lines. We say them every Anzac Day. We know them. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old, and so on. There are two lines in that poem which speak to the sacrifice made by the men of HMAS Perth, and most especially to those who lie in an unknown grave on the sea floor, or to those who died in the jungles of Burma and Thailand, or in the coal mines of Japan. And the lines are these: to the innermost heart of their own land they are known, as the stars are known to the night. It's beautifully put, isn't it? And to tell their story in this book has been, as I said at the beginning, a labour of love. I've tried to write it so that all the facts are there, so that it's history that will satisfy, if you like, even the most demanding professional sailor, or the same people who buy Patrick O'Brien, or people who are friends and members of the National Maritime Museum, who are going to be very critical. But at the same time, I've done my best to tell a story, to write it like a novel, in the drama of storms and war at sea, of misery and death, excitement and suspense that will entice and hold someone who knows little of the Navy, of ships in the sea, but who just wants a bloody good read. I hope if you buy it, you find that's what it is. It has been one of the finest experiences of my life to write it. I'm proud of it. I think the Navy's proud of it. They said they were. And if you read it, I hope you will be too. But above all, I hope you will be proud of the great deeds that were done to leave us the country that we so much love today. Thanks very much.